Hello. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This episode, episode 37, will feature Talal Hattar. Grief and mourning take many forms. My name is Neil Parekh. That's my co-host, Dawn Helmrich Neuburg. Dawn, always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Neil. You too. You too.
This is our, it's unusual that we're on the first Thursday of the month. Usually we're good with going on the second and fourth Thursdays, but sometimes we need to reschedule shows and accommodate, work obligations, etc. I want to take a moment just to acknowledge folks who might be watching on replay. Thank you for coming back and watching the show. If this time didn't work out for you. And I do want to make note of the fact that today is Yom Kippur, the Jewish Day of Atonement. And my personal apologies. I try not to schedule events on high holy days or major holidays in general. When I realized that that's the day it fell on after we had announced it, I kind of kicked myself. All I can do is promise to do better next year. But I want to thank everyone who has joined us in the past, who has watched the show. It's still kind of hard for me to believe, Dawn, that this is episode 37.
Crazy.
We've been doing this for a year and a half. There's some really interesting topics that we've covered and that we're going to be covering today. Grief and mourning take many forms is the way that we've kind of framed the show. And we'll be talking about the grieving process when you lose a loved one, but also when there's real grief and mourning around losing a job and losing your sense of self. And these are all things that Dawn, myself, and our guest Talal will be able to relate to. I want to give a quick look back to our guest in our last episode, Paige Goebel, who is a senior at Lake Braddock Secondary School here in Virginia. Getting mental health support was hard. Choosing to help other students was easy. You can find that in our archives. Dawn, it meant a lot. She was the youngest guest that we've had on the show so far. And just to get that insight into kind of what teenagers are doing around mental health advocacy was great.
I felt she was more mature than I am. She was like so poised and put together, and like she had like her life all on track. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a hot mess in comparison. She was great.
I wouldn't quite say you're a hot mess, Dawn.
It's been a week.
I mean, we're all a hot mess in some way, shape, or form. I'll share some of that later in the show. It's certainly been a challenging couple of weeks. I think that one of the things that I always am very proud of the fact that we do bring our authentic selves to this show, and when we struggle, we're not afraid to share it. I'll just share, a couple of weeks ago, my wife Pam broke her ankle, so I've gained a newfound appreciation for working moms and single parents everywhere. Doing a crash course and dealing with everything from laundry to cooking to meal prep to feeding two other people and doing my own work, etc. So that's been challenging. We have a kitchen renovation that we're about to kick off. Pam's parents are coming down in 2 weeks. I have a trip to Atlanta. We'll talk about grief, but yesterday was the anniversary of my dad's passing. We have tomorrow is the anniversary of when I first started at United Way, and I want to make a big deal out of that this month and going forward. It's also ADHD Awareness Month, and that's something that I'm committed to talking about and sharing about. And oh yeah, work is getting even more busy. So yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot going on. What about you, Dawn? What's it been like for you?
Yeah, today was a very rough day for me. This is month number 2 with no employment, and
Yeah.
very looking for a job is a full-time job. It's very stressful. Rejection is something that I'm not that great at, and I'm experiencing a lot of it. Also, filling my time. um i I'm a doer. So like I'm working on like 2 nonprofit projects right now, right? Which like people are like, oh wow, that's really great, right? And it is, but they're very, very simple projects um that I could pretty much do in my sleep. And I'm giving a talk next Tuesday for the American Association of University Women, which I'm really excited about. It's an hour-long talk. I'm all prepped for it. I'm giving a session at United Way next about
Yep.
writing, how to write a published book. So that's really exciting, but they're not 8-hour work days, and that's what I'm familiar with. So then I get really heady. I get really into my head, and then I worry about everything, and I think the world's going to blow up. And today was one of those days where I just sort of laid in bed and cried today because I felt like the world was going to blow up. The good thing is that I have a good support system, and I pulled myself up out of bed and got myself together to do this show. So that's the positive part.
Well, thank you for doing that. I think it's really important that people hear and see and hear the fact that we sometimes struggle with our own issues, that we're, on a day-to-day basis. We're not therapists, we're not counselors. We try not to offer, kind of therapeutic advice on the show. What we can do is to be empathetic and speak from our own experience. Let's give a quick shout out to some of the folks that are watching. We have a good group of people that have joined so far. Chitachi Egwu is joining from Florida. I know she's usually in Florida. I hope I'm correct. But Chitachi, thank you for joining us early. I know that sometimes you join us late in the show and catch the tail end live. So it's really great to see you at the beginning of the show. Our friend Jonathan, former guest on the show, is watching from the East Village. Jonathan, always great to have you. Kate is watching from Milwaukee. Can you remind us, Dawn, where is Kate relative to where you are?
She is downstairs. I rent from Kate. Kate is also my very best friend, and she lives downstairs, and I live upstairs. We live upstairs.
You rent from her, which is great. And I want to share that Kate is actually going to be on our show in a little bit. At the end of October, Kate has agreed to come back. She was on our show she was like our
very
third
beginning, very beginning,
third or fourth guest, I think.
Yep.
So she is going to be joining us, and I just want to kind of share that card with folks. She's going to be take that comment off. We'll be talking about bipolar disorder, ADHD, PTSD, and anxiety. Some new diagnoses that Kate has and how she's dealing with them. So we really want to thank you, Kate, for coming back to kind of give an update. I know when she was on the show last time, she talked about her son. So this will definitely be an interesting conversation. She'll be joining us Thursday, October 23rd, our usual second Thursday of the month conversation. So that'll be great. And then let's see, what else do we have coming up? Other comments we have. Jim is watching from Brew City, which is actually just
Go Brewers! Woo! Go Brewers!
And Jim is where, Dawn?
He is 2 doors down from me. He's in my living room. No, he's
on the other way. Jim, of course, is Dawn's husband.
Yes. My
sister is watching from Bellevue. Amy, thank you very much for joining. Bellevue, Washington, not Bellevue. It would be okay if you're watching from Bellevue, which is a well-known psychiatric hospital in New York. But no, that's not where she's at the moment. I do want to point out, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but her profile picture is a picture of our dad and her when she was little. I mentioned earlier that our dad passed away 16 years ago yesterday. So it's something we've both been thinking about. Patricia Freudenberg is watching from New York. Patricia, thank you so much for joining us. And I want to thank you for the email you sent. Patricia has done a lot of work around grief and legacy and how we remember people and how we honor people who've passed away. So we may hear more from Patricia both later in the episode, but also potentially as a guest down the line. So thank you for joining us. And Dawn, Amy says that she understands and hears you in terms of some of the challenges that you're dealing with. So with that, I want to bring on our guest, Talal Hattar. Talal is a friend of mine and Pam's, my wife, from when Pam was in grad school in Seattle. And we've known him for more than 20 years. So I'm thrilled to bring Talal on. And if we need to have any votes around which baseball team is the best, I know that I've got two votes to your one, Dawn, because Talal is a Yankee fan, but he's also
Yankees.
But he's also a Packers fan. So, there's a little,
that helps.
6-7 type of thing going on. Talal, thank you for taking the time to join us on this show. As you heard, we've been doing this for about 1.5 years now. We've covered a number of different issues, but one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is really grief and mourning and the different forms it takes. And I know you've put some thoughts together on that. So let's go ahead and start that conversation. What comes up for you when you start thinking about grief and mourning?
Oh, how do you isolate what comes up? There's a lot of it. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, and I also help people at work with dealing with it. So it's a long, convoluted, highly unpleasant process that nobody ever wants, and pretty much everyone needs like a hole in the head, but we all get to go through it. Yeah.
So what are some of the ways in which you've experienced grief, or what are some of the things that you've, whether it's specific examples or things that you've mourned? What are some of the experiences that you've had around it?
Okay. Well, basically, when I got turned about 29, 30 years old, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And that kind of created a cascading effect for me, because basically I came to realize after that I'm autistic, and I kind of never knew it. And the way I dealt with autism as a kid is repressing most of my emotions so I could fit in. So like when puberty came, I didn't realize I was gay and got to find that out all at the same time. That happened at the time of 9/11. So like pretty much every aspect of who I was got trashed, and I had to find some way of building it from scratch.
And that was your whole identity got upended.
Yeah.
With that.
I mean, pretty much everything I valued about myself at that point. It just, you lose all those things, and as you lose them, you go back and find there's something new. And so the grieving would just sort of open and reclose itself over and over and over again, like a sort of never-ending sick roller coaster.
Talk about some of those that sense of identity, how what you identified with, how you described yourself at that time. I mean, I remember being when you were when we were in Seattle and when you were diagnosed with MS, the autism, I think my understanding is that it came later, either after we left 10 years ago
My
or right
knowledge
around
of
that
it
time, right?
started happening about that time, but I came to sort of understand and accept it like maybe 5 or 6 years afterward. A lot of the
Mm,
problem is that for autism, the examples they give of people are so who are autistic are kind of like Rain Man autistic, and you're not like that. So it takes a
sure.
lot of research to come to realize what's really going on. So in terms of it, it just took a lot longer to figure out what the dynamics of what were happening to me.
So
I
let's
mean, they'd
take
always
a
been happening, but the problem is all the tools I had for managing it were ripped away when I got the MS.
so let's take a step back. If we can get into our time machine, go back before MS really started. I mean, obviously, there was a developmental process. It kind of evolved, but before it really took hold, before it really impacted kind of how you functioned, how would you describe yourself? Who was Talal Hattar before MS?
I was a very organized person who never got caught with his pants down, got my job done every single time, and was able to do a whole hell of a lot of work. And that all disappeared because with the MS, I had a serious deficit in my short-term recall and a very hard time repressing emotion. And all discipline is based on heavy short-term recall and repression of emotion. So I went from being one of the most organized and disciplined people I ever met to one of the least organized and disciplined people I ever met. And it was very difficult. I mean, I was used to like doing a lot, and if something was hard, working harder and suddenly beating it, and that vanished.
I remembered, I mean, having you were a little. I think you were the year ahead of Pam
I
in,
believe so. I
grad
believe
school.
so.
So you weren't in classes together. I remember when she joined, um, and I remember that it really was a transformation. It was a change in personality. I mean, it really was a different person from whom you were before to with the MS. Dawn, I know you have a question to follow up on that.
Yeah. In our prep, we were talking about you were talking about kind of repressing emotions and how that kind of went away when all this happened. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like when you suddenly just couldn't repress those emotions in the same way that you had previously?
Oh, sure. There's lots of different levels of it that happened. The most obvious one was basically, like I said, I've been repressing anything that gave me cognitive dissonance since I was like maybe 10, 8, somewhere like there. So I literally didn't know I was gay. I mean, you hear all these other guys who do this sort of thing of, I always knew I was gay, but I just couldn't accept it. Like you could have knocked me over with a feather when I figured it out, because after the second attack, suddenly I knew, oh, I want to nail him. And once you know that, you can't unknow that, and that causes problems. But short-term, the repression of emotion, also just pushing yourself to keep working. I would push, but then I wouldn't be able to push. And part of it was I also had chronic fatigue. So the fatigue was much higher than it was before, but you can't get everything done, but you keep promising things the way you used to. And so you lie to people, not meaning to lie, but I mean, you make promises you can't keep. I mean, Nietzsche said that a human is the creature who can make and keep promises. Well, not so much anymore. I mean, you lose that aspect of who you are as a person, your honor, your self-respect, it goes out the window. Taking care of things and making things get done is the core of what our lives are about in capitalism. And when you stop being able to do that, you get behind on your bills, and you never remember to bring recalled books back and stuff like that. It's hard. And then, of course, the problem is you, okay, say, for example, all right, I'm writing a paper. Now, it used to be really organized, but now piles of crap are everywhere. I have to cite the paper. So I've got to dig it up. I'm digging it up. I find a book that's been recalled at the library. Now, there's those little recall words we play at the University of Washington. We used to play, I'm sure they still do, the people are still there, where basically someone recalls your book and as a grad student, you got to bring it back because they'll charge you with the wazoo for fines. A fine's been going for maybe 2 weeks on this. It's expensive. Do I take the book and put it somewhere where I'm going to see it the next day, or do I keep looking for the paper? Because I'll forget the paper if I move somewhere else like that. And you go into sort of a terror meltdown. Now, the reason you're in a terror meltdown is because you're used to just simply boom, 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 not thinking of any of the stuff below or the emotions involved. Later on, I did therapy. I realized, well, what you do is you put the book where you're going to see it, because eventually go back to writing the paper, and you'll eventually realize when you're writing, oh, screw it, I need that paper again. You'll get up and do it. But the end result is you're going to be incredibly slow at everything you do. And you're certainly not going to be able to write for a living. But it took me about 10 years to figure that out.
What are some other like coping mechanisms or things or how did you manage your grieving process, knowing that, you know, kind of like all of this came about at one time?
Very poorly. It would be cycles of things that you think I can fix one thing and then you fix it, but then that didn't work. So you try fixing another thing and it didn't work. And you sort of are mired and meshed in it. But I couldn't quit because my only health insurance was from my job as a teaching assistant. I couldn't lose it. So you just keep trying to fix things and things just keep getting worse. And it takes years of your life to sort of come to a sort of baseline of it. And so basically you just keep fucking it up for a really long time and kind of watch most of what you cared about, most of your self-respect disappear.
That was your sense of self, just leaving.
That was my sense of self the entire time I was there.
Yeah.
I mean, this could fall apart any time. I mean, I was lucky in a couple of things. I mean, all the problems I had with autism in terms of dealing with people, I at least learned from really bad experiences I had before MS, how to manage in an academic setting. I formed a good committee. I was really blessed in my committee. They believed in me. And most graduate students don't have that luck. But in terms of it, no, I mean, I basically am a teacher, so I'm teaching for a living. But I mean, of course, you're supposed to be writing papers and getting them published. I went to exactly one conference in a decade because, simply put, I was keeping my head above floor trying to get my job done. People would graduate. I was still there by the end. And where I finally realized that I couldn't do the job was basically I stopped teaching for a term, and I worked in the computer lab. They gave me my same salary for working in the computer lab, which was great because basically I'd spend 2 to 3 hours out of my shift, you know, helping people figure out how to print a paper, and I had plenty of time to write. And I realized at that point, at the pace I'm writing, there's just no way I am going to be able to do this for a living because I'm never going to have this much free time to write again. And my stamina is such I can only write for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day when I'm writing. I mean, after that, I'll just burn out. I'll be too tired and not be able to think. And so at that point, I mean, Craig was lucky that, you know, he had the opportunity of starting North Star where I work now. And so I moved over into that. But I mean, I spent 10 to 12 years of my life trying to figure it out because my whole identity was tied up in it. I really couldn't do anything. I wasn't anybody without it.
And just walk us through the timeline. You were diagnosed with MS
2001, just before
2001. That's also when you realized you were gay.
Pretty much at the same time, yeah.
Right around 9/11. At what point autism came around that time, a little later?
My awareness of it started coming maybe 2004, 2005, where someone said something I was doing was stimming. I think I had a denial period of maybe 2 to 3 years at that. I eventually found like blogs by people who are more high functioning. Because I mean, the problem is when you write up these mental health things, they always write such wackazoid, like heavy duty cases. And you look at this isn't me. And then it takes people who are like, you know, living through it and writing, you begin to realize, oh shit, yeah, no, that. And so it was more of a process like that. But I mean, of course, the autism had affected me a whole life. I mean, I've never had good social skills. I have never been not beaten up by kids at school and shit like that. I mean, that's just always been part of the whole way I was as a person.
So when you eventually realized that you wouldn't be able to stay in the PhD program, which, I mean, your circumstances aside, the PhD program is challenging for anyone. It's and academia itself is challenging. But coming out of that and working with Craig at North Star, you were able to refashion yourself. You have, I mean, you're
No, I
highly
survived.
functioning. You survived.
That doesn't mean
with-
I'm who I signed up to be or like who I wound up.
You're not who you signed up to be or who you thought you would be. You're not.
When you
thrilled
go
with
through a
who
grief
you are.
process that's fairly large, you're left to rebuild. Because I mean, I was going to like go through. You said you're giving me 7 minutes at the beginning, so it kind of
Go
was
ahead.
lay out the process. But
Yeah, go
now
ahead.
we're already in the middle. I don't think it makes sense to do it now.
Yeah.
But basically, the acceptance part is where you rebuild yourself, and basically the middle of the process where you're going through the fight, the flight, which is she calls basically what does she call it?
Kubler-Ross.
Yeah, Kubler-Ross does her little thing where she kind of calls it anger, and she calls it bargaining. It works for her to call it bargaining because she was studying people who were diagnosed with a fatal illness. They bargain with God to save their lives. But for most people, it's just fight or flight. If you have an anger response, or you put yourself into fantasy situations of what if or if only. And it's just basically anger to sort of help pull yourself up in fantasy to get out of the pain for a while. But you go through that until you kind of come to the point where you stop doing that. And that's when acceptance begins. When you're at an emotional level, you're not trying to escape or angry about what happened. And then you've got to look at what you have left and you've got to rebuild with it. The problem is what if you're not left with anything you particularly liked? I mean, in a way, it's easier when you die, if someone else dies, if there was other things in your life that you wanted. But I mean, I signed up to be a teacher. I signed up to be a scholar. I didn't sign up to be a chemical dependency counselor. Don't get me wrong. It's honorable work. It's good work. I help people. That's not small, but it's not anything for which I have a passion or anything. It's just what I do to pay the bills.
Is grieving something that you never really get through, that you're just in a different stage of, but you're still
I don't know.
grieving?
I mean, I'm not dead yet. So, I mean, hopefully, I mean, what I can tell you is you'll go through periods of time where you've got to do work. I mean, for example, there's always a desire when you're in the grieving process to push the skip it button. You want to skip it button more than anything else. Skip it would be so great. There is no skip it button. So, for example, anger. I have trouble expressing anger for people like God or my mother because to do so is impious. So my therapist had to sit Talal. You need to write. You're not giving this letter to anybody, but you have to write these letters. So I sit and I write the letters. It's really bitter, poisonous, venomous crap. Now, most of the time when you're in a process of healing, you do the expression, there's a sense of relief. There was zero sense of relief after that. But 2 to 3 months later, things began to change because the poison was passed. But it's not like passing the poison was fun, but you had to do it. This was years, stuff that had happened years before, but still you had to let go of it, even though you don't let yourself think about it. And I didn't think about that stuff too often, but if you don't process it, you get stuck. When it comes to things like the depression, I spent a good 10 years depressed, but I was depressed about the total wrong thing, so it doesn't count. You don't get credit for being depressed about the wrong thing. I was depressed about the fact I couldn't get over this. That's not going to help you at all. You can be depressed forever about that, and not one iota of that depression is going to heal you. I had to accept with grief, sadness, that I cannot write for a living anymore, and that I cannot teach for a living anymore, and I cannot do those things that I lost. And I had to spend 6 months doing that like 2 years ago and gained 25 pounds, which I still haven't lost. And yeah, you begin to be able to invest more once you do it. But the problem is, it's not like I wasn't working on it the whole time. It took that long to figure out what the hell was going on.
Sure.
It just sort of colonizes your life after a while, and you just work with it.
Sure.
But you got to
Talal,
read the right thing. If you're reading the wrong thing, sorry. Thanks for playing.
It's not productive. You're not.
You have to
You're not,
productively grieve.
yeah,
And
productive.
unfortunately, you can't say, okay, I'm here to be productive. It doesn't work that way. You've got to figure this shit out. And there's not a really good guide. And the therapists help, but they don't always know either. So you just got to work your way through.
Yeah.
And it takes as long as it takes. And meanwhile, you lost the most productive years of your life. But what are you going to do? That's just what you have.
I want to bring in some comments from people who are watching. And going back to a comment that we made at the beginning of the show where I said that we're not therapists and we're not counselors, but we can offer empathy and support. Amy shared, even though we're not therapists or counselors, we're doing a great service of facilitating this safe forum for people to express their feelings. So thank you, Amy. And she also gives a hello to Talal and Go Yanks. Kristen is watching from Illinois. Kristen, thank you for joining us. Always great to have you watching the show. Our friend Apollo is watching from Philadelphia. Thank you, Apollo. My mom is watching from Hastings on Hudson. Thank you, Mom, as always. We'll be talking about some things that obviously Amy and I and you have talked about in the last few days in just a little bit, just to foreshadow a bit for folks who may have joined late. When we talk about grief, Talal has been talking about grief kind of in a broader sense. Dawn and I will share our own thoughts about grief, and they include some of what Talal was talking about, but also what I think people usually think about when they think of grief when you lose a loved one. My father passed away 16 years ago. Yesterday was the anniversary of his passing. Patricia says, your show is so important. So thank you for that. And she's glad to support. And my mom says she's glad, Talal, you're openly expressing your experiences. It'll be highly educational for others. I think people will get a lot out of it.
Thank you, Mrs. Barrick.
Our friend Stefan Kaplan, also a former guest on the show, tuned in late, but always here to support. It's been a long day. Stefan, if you were fasting, I hope your fast was easy. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, for folks who were observing Yom Kippur today, I am sorry that we scheduled a show on Yom Kippur. I try not to do that. But when we had to juggle our calendars, I just didn't pay attention to the dates well enough. But thank you, Stefan, for joining us after what I'm sure was a long day. For point of reference, I actually did fast one day for Yom Kippur, observing it with a friend. That'll be a topic for another show later on. Amy appreciates what you said about the skip it button, Talal. I think a lot of people could relate to that. And she also says that grieving is so complicated and such a personal process. It absolutely is. Dawn, you've dealt with grief in a few different forms. We've talked about grief when it comes to losing someone close to you. You've talked about your mom a few times on this show, but there are other things that you've grieved and mourned over the years. Can you talk a little bit about those different types of grief that you have experienced?
Yeah. So I think the biggest one for me was after I got attacked, and I didn't really know who I was after that. Everything that I had known didn't feel right anymore. It just didn't feel right. I had a hard time keeping the same friends. I had a hard time, talking to the people that I was close to. I lost a lot of my memories of good things that had happened when I was growing up. I couldn't relate to people in the same way. I was incredibly broken, And I didn't know how to fix myself. And so when Talal was talking about like really that really messy process of like grieving the wrong thing, right? Like I was grieving that I didn't know how to fix myself. That was not what I should have been grieving, right? I should have been grieving the fact that something very important was taken away from me by being raped. That there was my whole innocence, my whole identity that I had of this world that I lived in was completely different 2 hours after this happened, and the trust I had in life and the world was gone. And it was really a messy process. I didn't care for myself anymore. I didn't respect who I was any longer. I didn't think that I was useful for any purpose. So I couldn't work. I couldn't go to school. I spent a lot of time thinking that I was just an object for people. And it was just a really, really difficult thing to figure out who I was becoming, and to decide which path I was going to take. Was I going to take the path that took me down a road where I just was not going to be a productive human being anymore, and maybe I shouldn't even be alive anymore? Or was I going to choose a path where I could turn my situation into something that might help other people? But it was a very difficult road and super bumpy, and just like grieving, just like when they talk about the 10 stage, 7 stages, 5 stages, I don't know, of grief, however many stages there are, and that they're not linear. It's the same thing when you kind of lose your sense of self, is that they go back and forth and left and right. And I still, if a really good friend says to me, "Oh, do you remember that time that we went to this party and we had such a great time?" And I have no recollection whatsoever. I grieve that. I mourn not being able to recall those types of memories that brought me happiness and joy. And it's very, very frustrating to kind of like just lose that identity entirely. Because that's all I knew for 21 years was that person. I will say, I think I resonated, Talal, with a lot of what you said, because, your hand, these are the cards you're dealt, right? And, I don't have the greatest self-esteem in the world. And I'm doing the best I can with what I got. And I try really hard to, be proud of myself for accomplishments and do things that are, important and matter. And sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't. And I've learned to like really be okay with that for the most part, until like today, where it just caught up to me and I just bawled my eyes out because I ordered the wrong thing on Amazon. I mean, that was my breaking point, right? Like I ordered the wrong thing on Amazon and it came and I lost my shit. And it wasn't about the thing I ordered wrong on Amazon, right? It was just the tipping point of everything that has sort of been happening with losing my job and all this other stuff. And I just lost it. I just completely lost it. And it was the thing that made me feel like I was not competent to do anything else because I couldn't order the right phone case on Amazon, because I didn't take that extra step to double check it before I ordered it. So anyway, my point being is that grieving is a continuous process, and when you lose something like your sense of self, it never fully goes away. You're always something that is constantly reminding you that that person that you were before isn't who you are now.
I would like to one of the things that really resonated that you said to me is you were saying I was feeling sad about the fact I couldn't get over this. I ought to have been doing something else. And I love that phrasing, ought to have. Like, there's some awesome fucking way we're all supposed to be like grieving, and we're supposed to have this manual and go down the check mark, and you did it wrong. The truth is I was guided with therapists who were working with me on this. It's what it is, and that's what sucks about it. It's like we feel like we ought to have been able to. How could you have done it? It's grief. My friend, a good friend of mine, Nellie, she once asked me, I wonder if there's some way we can find a method of like streamlining grief or doing it. I looked at her, it's like, no, if you can streamline it, if you can find some way out of it, it's not grief. It just isn't. Yeah. And in terms of the only thing I can say about the loss of self is that there has to be some sense of pride that you develop that you're still here after all that. Mm-hmm. Because withstanding is a form of strength.
Yes.
It's rough because it's not the form of strength necessarily you wanted.
Yeah.
But withstanding is a form of strength. And Dawn, you are still here. After all of that, you are a strong woman. And you know what? Screw if you're upset with Amazon. You know what? The tears come. When they come, it's not a damn thing you're going to do, because you know what? These little things trigger you. And people who don't get that, God bless them, because they haven't been through any of this. Yeah. Because once you've been through, you're going to know that, oh, that's so common. And you'll be telling 5 million, because I can tell you tons of stories about moments I bawled and cried or fallen apart over jack shit.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do? Because, I mean, it's not, you're, as you pointed out, you're at that moment where you just hit the tipping point because you were trying to hold yourself together the whole time.
Yeah, exactly.
You were still here. You were still here, and that's something to be proud of, because they haven't gotten rid of you yet.
Thanks.
I do want to repeat that for folks in the back in case they didn't hear it. That Dawn, you're still here. But Talal, you are too.
Yeah, I just can't figure out what to do with it.
I am as well.
I have no idea. I'm like, okay, how do I find some way to be excited about showing up every day in terms of my work life, in terms of, you know, stuff like that. It's solving that is there, but no, I'm proud of myself for still being alive.
But we should all be proud of that. I did want to ask Dawn, when you were talking about, grieving that sense of self, what are the parallels, or how similar is that in terms of the grieving process when you lost your mom 5 years ago during COVID?
I liked, but when we did the pre-call, Talal mentioned something about like how your identity, a lot of times your grieving process is different depending upon how you identify with the person. And I had an incredibly close relationship with my mom, and my mom was like the only constant person in my life after I got raped. And so, I think it was really difficult for me in some ways. I had a long time, my mom was sick for a long time, and that, sadly, that helps, because I kind of was able to slowly understand what was coming my way and the feelings about that. So I miss her all the time. But I think if you're really, really close to someone, it's really hard to ever get over that loss. It's just something that just stays with you, and it's harder sometimes than other times. Having just lost my job, like, who's the person that, Jim is amazing and wonderful, and he is my go-to, but I did want to call my mom, right? And sure, like, have her give me the advice that I knew that I would never take, but I would want to hear from her anyway, So
I love it. The advice I would never take, but I wanted to hear it anyway because I miss her so much. I love it.
Yeah. So, so it, that process of losing my mom really sits with me, I think, a lot. And I was in a job for 20 to almost 20 years, right? And I just lost that job. It's only been 2 months, right? Like, I don't even know what to say about that. Like, that whole grieving process is just like, what happened? How did that happen? After, that whole entire time, it's yeah, that one's still like swirling in my world. So I
Sure.
go in different places with each one of those things.
Sure. I thought Patty's comment, grief is a thief, I thought was really, really good. We've been talking a little bit about the stages of grief. My mom put in that denial, anger, testing it in your mind, acceptance comes last. Here is Talal made reference to Kubler-Ross. The grief cycle, if it's too small, I can read it out. The first stage is denial, avoidance, confusion, elation, shock, and fear, followed by anger, frustration, irritation, anxiety, bargaining, struggling to find meaning, reaching out to others, telling one's story, depression, being overwhelmed, helplessness, hostility, and flight, and then acceptance, exploring options, putting a new plan in place, moving on. I would say, and I haven't, I just looked for an image quickly. I think that it's certainly not linear, certainly not necessarily, going up, in a straight line. I think it's more of a roller coaster, and with a lot of switchbacks where you're going to go back to denial or back to anger. It's not necessarily
It's like a pinball
straightforward
machine. You bounce back and
or
forth between the
pinball
middle
machine.
stages.
A pinball machine is a good way of putting it. I think that as a few other folks, let's see. My mom says that Dawn is you're giving life experience for folks, sharing your life experience. The grieving process is very personal and subjective for everyone, so it's going to show up differently for each person. And Patty just shared the different stages as well: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, finding meaning, and that's what she's doing with helping people think about the legacy of the loved ones that they've lost, and that we need to use our emotional toolbox. As I mentioned earlier, and because my sister is watching, I will try to remember to refer to our father, because we shared him. It's kind of a inside joke because often Amy, when we're together, she'll refer to her mom, and I'm like, "Hey, it's my mom too." I'm sitting here, but
my brother
as
does the same thing. You brothers, God. Anytime I say my dad, he's like,
yeah.
oh, it's our dad. Yeah.
So for me, and there's so many different ways that this has played out, but as I mentioned, my dad passed away in 2009. Our dad passed away in 2009, and 16 years ago, October 1st was the day. And I've marked that occasion, marked that date different ways over the years. I remember one year I, kind of thought back to like everything that was happening every day leading up to, for his last 2.5 weeks, the last time I spoke to him on the phone before he went into the hospital. But this year, I shared a letter that I had written to hospital administration about this gentleman, Paris Thomas, who was worked at the security desk downstairs in the building that my dad was in, and the role that he played in, greeting us every day and giving us support, and kind of how touched he was. When my dad passed after 2.5 weeks in the hospital, we'd been going in every day, and we got the call at 2:30 at night. So my mom and I went down to see him. Amy had actually left for a 2-day trip to do a job interview because she knew that our dad would have wanted her to do that. But we went down at 2:30 in the morning after we got the call. We said our goodbyes, and then we had all our family, instead of going to the hospital, come to our house the next day. And when I spoke to Paris about a month or two later, he told me that when he didn't see us come in, and he didn't see anybody come in that he had recognized, that he'd gotten to know, he knew something had happened. He knew that my dad had passed, and it was a way that I wrote this piece just a few months after his passing. It was my way of honoring my dad by recognizing Paris and kind of the role that he played in our process and in our grieving. Staying with, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the other forms of grief as well, but I do want to share something that I've really kind of, I don't want to say struggled with, but thought about for a while. I pulled just a few pictures together of people that I've lost recently. Most of these are friends from high school. You'll see a picture of Steve Taylor in the bottom corner. I talked about him on the show back in April. He was a colleague of mine at Digimentors, and his death really hit me hard as well. But in the last year, I've lost 3 other friends who I was in high school with. Most recently, Jonathan Lasser, who's on the left in the beard. He died of cancer just 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't really been in touch with the other 2 women as well, but that hit me hard. And my friend Tammy Fuller, who's in this group shot from when I went to prom. I went to prom as a freshman. I just want that known out there. Anyone's keeping track? It was huge. But Tammy also died of cancer earlier this year. And last year, Colleen O'Reilly died from a heart attack, just a sudden heart attack. John is 2 years younger than me. Tammy was 3 years older. Colleen was 2 years older. These are all peers. And one thing that I've been wanting to do for ever since I can remember is I don't want to forget the people who've passed. And I keep wanting to put together, keep a list, keep pictures, have like almost like an in memoriam wall somewhere. And I might still do something about that because I feel like I'll forget folks. There are a number of other people that are on this mental list of mine that include, not just family, friends, but unfortunately, other classmates, including Ronald Bean, who passed away in his sleep, and Andy Behrens, Meg Zupancic, a friend of ours from college, Deanne Cartwright, another high school friend, John Klaja, a friend from United Way, several teachers that I was very close to, even a friend of mine from Seattle, Tatsuo Nakata, who was killed in a freak road accident. These emotions that come up when you talk about people, I think they are very similar, Dawn, when we think about grief and the loss of kind of other losses that we have. You talked about your job after working at your local United Way for 20 years. I worked at United Way in Washington State, and then at Worldwide at their headquarters for 5 years, total of 10 years, almost 10 years between them. I still mourn that loss. I still grieve who I was. Talal, we talked about this earlier. When it's wrapped up in your identity, it's really hard to kind of manage and process that loss. I've always identified very closely with wherever I've worked. It's always become, very entrenched in my being. somehow this was different. I lived for the work I was doing at United Way and working with people in the network. That's how I got to meet Dawn at a conference for local United Ways. And it's a huge loss, and I still have trouble kind of processing that. I'm involved with our United Way alumni organization, which is good, which is helpful, but at the same time, I still like when I see updates from local United Ways, and that's something years ago I would have written about, shared on social media, used as examples in presentations. Now it's just something that it's like an echo of my past. One example, which I think is maybe a little bit more trivial, but there's also something there. And Talal, this you may be able to relate to this in terms of from the academic perspective. When I was in college, I had an enormous book collection, and it was totally organized. And this is going back, more than 30 years. And from various moves and moving around, I had to give up my books over time. And that's something that I think about. It's an identity. It was something that I really, my Russian history, European history collection was pretty solid. But that's now an echo of my past. And I think that all these emotions, to me, they're all the same. When you lose someone or something or some part of yourself.
Well, remember, Neil, guys are their jobs in our culture. So it makes sense that when you leave a job, especially, I mean, again, Neil, you don't just take jobs that are just jobs. You take jobs with, a very strong ethical content that you struggle for some form of justice and helping people always. So when you've been part of that fight for a long time, and that's who you are as a person, yeah, you're going to have to grieve that when you let go of it, or even if you didn't let go of it in a way because you wanted to, you were ready to retire, whatever. What do you do with that part of yourself now? And as for the books, I mean, yeah, I can tell you when I threw all mine away in a dumpster, that was pretty freaking, I mean, in a way it was cathartic, but it did also hurt to do it. But I mean, I don't need them anymore. No one is going to ask those questions anymore. And if I haul them all down to Vegas, they're going to give me $200 for like all 10, 12 boxes I bring. And you know what? That hurts so much. I'd rather just simply take them in the dumpster using my hand trucks. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It hurts, but I mean, they're dead. They're part of your life that's dead. What do you do? I totally get what you mean about the books.
It's hard. It's hard. I want to make sure that we get a couple more comments in. I know Jonathan says, I suspect that my parent formation is sort of normal. So he's talking about the commentary when I refer to my dad, and my sister is watching. So I kept trying to say our dad. Patty talks about living a life to be remembered. She calls legacy the seventh stage of grief, the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's her area of focus as a grief consultant. So that's certainly interesting to explore. She says it sneaks up on you through the years. The key is how to get back to recovery. Jonathan says, I'm in the middle of my senior reboot. Having to part with so many things I've collected over the years is often sad, sometimes depressing. So that is that sense of letting go. My mom says that at least my books were donated. That's the books that made it to home, Mom. I was there in over the summer going through some of our shelves, and the books that I had in Hastings, I went through and grabbed maybe 10 of them, and I let go of a number. But I'm talking about there are so many more books that weren't even on the shelves at my mom's house. Like, I have no idea where they ended up over the years. I remember bookshelves when I was in college, having like a full wall. So in our dorm, everybody got 2 shelves that they could use. They could put wherever they want, on the wall. I went and collected everyone else's shelves they weren't using, so I could build a massive bookshelf in my room. So yeah, I don't know where all those other ones are, but at the end of the day, my hope in doing this episode and focusing on grief is that we offered some solace to people, some way of thinking about things a little differently, seeing the connections between various things we've lost over time. And we may revisit this issue in a little bit after a couple of episodes. So we will keep that in mind. I want to remind folks that our next episode will be October 23rd. Kate Easton will be our guest, and we're looking forward to that conversation. This is a return engagement for her, but she is has some new diagnoses that she'll be sharing with us, and we are certainly glad that she will be able to join us for this episode. October 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Bipolar disorder, ADHD, PTSD, and anxiety. Certainly a lot to talk about. And with that, we will bring this episode to a close. Talal, again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for this conversation. I appreciate kind of what you've gone through. As long as I've known you, and as much as we've talked about, I learned things about you in this episode and in our conversations that I didn't know before, and I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
It definitely means a lot. And our friend Jonathan says, "Great show. Thank you." And I'm gonna hopefully. I don't know if she's watching, but if Pam's watching, hi Pam. Pam told me she might watch because Talal's on.
And Salamtik about that ankle, my dear. I hope you recover very quickly. It's gotta suck.
It's hard. It's hard with the broken ankle. But thank you, everyone. And we will see you in a couple weeks, October 23rd. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Talal.
Bye-bye.